Silent cowboy buys an Apache woman for $3, only to learn she's the tribal chief's wife. The sun had just begun its slow crawl over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the dusty streets of the small frontier town. Jack Silent Turner rode slowly into town, his horse's hooves kicking up tiny clouds of dust with each step. Jack was a quiet man, the kind who spoke only when he had something important to say, which was why people called him Silent. He had spent years roaming the plains, working as a cowboy and learning to survive in a world that was harsh, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. Unlike many men in town, he didn't seek attention or trouble. He preferred the quiet life, the company of his horse, and the endless stretch of open land where he could think without interruption. This town was different from others Jack had visited. It was small, almost forgotten by the government, and the people who lived there were tough and stubborn. They had learned to survive by being clever, cautious, and sometimes cruel. At the center of the town was a trading post, a place that smelled of leather, wood, and smoke. Traders and townsfolk gathered there to buy, sell, and exchange everything from food and supplies to livestock. Sometimes, unfortunately, people themselves were treated like goods, and the sight of captives, usually from Native American tribes, was not uncommon in such a place. Jack knew this, and it made him uneasy. But he had also learned long ago not to interfere in matters that could bring trouble he wasn't prepared to face. As he walked toward the trading post, Jack noticed a small crowd gathered around the front, their voices rising and falling in excitement and argument. He slowed his pace, curious but cautious. Among the people, he saw a woman sitting on the ground, her wrists bound with rough ropes. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with long dark hair that had been hastily tied back. Her eyes were wide and alert, scanning the crowd with a mixture of fear and determination. She was calm in a way that surprised Jack. Most captives would have been trembling, crying, or pleading, but she sat quietly watching everything around her as if she were studying a situation she didn't entirely control. Jack felt a strange pull in his chest. Something about the woman made him stop dead in his tracks. He didn't know her. He didn't know her story, and he certainly didn't know the risks of getting involved. Yet, he couldn't walk away. His instincts told him that she deserved a chance to be free, and that the decision was, somehow, in his hands. The trader was a large man with a booming voice and a rough, weathered face. He shouted over the crowd, announcing the prices for the captives. Some were sold for tens of dollars, while others, mostly women, were listed for much lower amounts. Jack listened quietly, trying not to draw attention to himself. When the trader reached the young woman, he laughed and slapped the table. "She's a fine one," he said, "and cheap, too. Only $3. "Who'll take her?" the crowd murmured in disbelief. $3? It was almost insulting, considering the fear and dignity the woman still held in her eyes. Jack hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. He didn't have to think long. He knew that if he wanted to help, he had to act quickly. Without raising his voice or drawing unnecessary attention, he stepped forward and laid $3 silver on the table. "I'll take her," he said simply, his voice calm but firm. The trader squinted at him, surprised by the sudden decision. "You sure, cowboy?" "She's no ordinary girl," the man said, though his tone hinted more at curiosity than warning. Jack nodded. "I'm sure," he replied. The trader laughed again, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls of the trading post. $3 and she's yours," he said, and with a wave of his hand he untied the woman's ropes. Jack stepped forward and helped her to her feet. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes studied him, scanning his face, his hands, and his posture as if trying to determine whether he was friend or foe. Jack understood her caution. He would have done the same in her place. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice soft but steady. She did not sound like someone who had been easily broken by captivity. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Jack respect her even more. He nodded, not sure what else to say. He knew that any wrong word could cause fear or suspicion. Sometimes, silence was the best way to communicate trust. They walked out of the trading post together. Jack kept a careful eye on the crowd, aware that some people might see him as foolish or even reckless for intervening. He led his horse to the side of the street, and the woman climbed onto the saddle behind him. She held on lightly, her body tense but controlled. Jack noticed that she didn't lean on him, didn't seek comfort.
She was strong in a way that was rare and impressive. As they rode away from the town, the woman finally spoke again.
"You don't know what you've done," she said quietly. Jack glanced back at her, curious. "I think I do," he replied. "I bought your freedom." She shook her head slightly, a shadow crossing her face. "It's not that simple," she said. Her words were careful, as though she was choosing each one with great care. Jack didn't press her for more. He had learned that patience and observation were just as important as action, especially when dealing with someone whose life had been complicated in ways he couldn't yet understand. The road stretched out before them, long and empty, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional rocky hill. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of earth and pine. Jack let the horse walk at a slow, steady pace, giving them both time to adjust to the situation. The woman, whose name he had not yet learned, finally relaxed slightly. Her posture softened, and she leaned back just a little, letting the wind catch her hair.
Jack thought about the small town they had left behind, about the trader and the crowd, about the simplicity and cruelty of a place where a human life could be bought for $3.
He thought about the choices people make when faced with fear, poverty, and desperation. And he thought about the woman riding behind him, a stranger who had just become the most important person in his immediate world. For hours they rode in silence. Jack's mind wandered to his own past, to the long years of wandering and working, to the moments when he had seen injustice and turned away because he was afraid. But this time he could not turn away. Something about this woman, something about the circumstances demanded his attention. He felt a sense of responsibility he had never experienced before. As the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the land, Jack and the woman reached a small clearing near a stream. He dismounted and offered her his hand to help her down. She stepped off the horse gracefully, her movements precise and careful. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two strangers connected by a choice that neither fully understood. "You saved me," she said finally, her voice soft but tinged with caution. Jack nodded. "I did what I thought was right," he said simply. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth in his eyes. Then, without another word, she turned and began to gather some dry wood and leaves for a fire. Jack watched her, impressed by her resilience and focus. She seemed capable, self-reliant, and wise beyond her years. As the day went on, Jack and the woman worked together to set up a small camp. They shared a simple meal of bread and dried meat, talking only in short, cautious sentences. Jack learned her name was Ahuli, and he respected the way she spoke carefully, measuring her words. She did not ask for explanations, did not demand anything from him, yet Jack felt a growing sense of connection and responsibility. He had bought her freedom for $3, but he realized that her freedom was worth far more than any coin he could carry. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Jack built a small fire, and Ahuli sat nearby, her eyes reflecting the flames. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet bond formed not from words, but from shared experience and mutual respect. Jack knew that their journey was just beginning, and that the simple act of buying her freedom would have consequences far greater than he could imagine. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival or routine work. He realized that some moments in life demand action, even when the risks are unknown. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Jack silently vowed to protect Ahuli, not because it was required of him, but because he knew it was the right thing to do. Little did he know, the events set in motion that day would lead him into a world far more complex and dangerous than anything he had encountered before, a world where courage, respect, and understanding would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the hills, casting a soft light over the camp where Jack and Ahuli had spent the night. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and fresh earth. Jack woke before dawn, as was his habit, and sat quietly by the fire, watching the smoke curl up into the sky. Ahuli was already awake, kneeling near the stream, washing her hands and face with the cold, clear water. She moved with grace and care, her calmness in the morning almost unnatural given the chaos she had endured the day before. Jack could not help but watch her. There was something in the way she carried herself, a quiet strength that made him realize she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Most people in the frontier towns acted out of fear or greed, but Ahuli seemed to act out of purpose, as if she understood the world in a way he did not. He wondered what her life had been like before she was taken. He wondered if she had always been this calm under pressure, or if the events of yesterday had forced her to grow faster than anyone could imagine. After washing, Ahuli stood and walked over to Jack, carrying a few pieces of bread she had found in her small pack. She handed him a piece without a word. Jack nodded in thanks, breaking the bread slowly, savoring the simple act of eating in peace. For a moment they sat together in silence, the only sounds being the flowing stream, the rustling of leaves, and the distant cries of birds. It was a peaceful moment, a rare one for two people who had so recently been caught in danger. Finally, Ahuli spoke. "You do not know what you have done," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made Jack straighten in his seat. He looked at her, curiosity and concern in his eyes.
"I think I do," he said carefully. "I bought your freedom yesterday."
"That's all I wanted." Ahuli shook her head slowly, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of worry and frustration. "No," she said softly, but with firm determination. "It is not so simple. You do not understand the world you have entered. My people, they will come looking for me." She paused, letting her words sink in. Jack frowned. He had known that freeing a captive could bring danger, but he had not imagined it could be immediate, or that the consequences would be so serious. "Your people?" Jack asked, leaning forward slightly. "Who are they?" Ahuli's eyes narrowed, and she looked away toward the horizon, as if imagining the approaching danger. "I am not like other captives," she said finally. "I am part of a tribe. I am someone important." Jack blinked, surprised. He had not expected such a revelation. "Important? How?" he asked gently. Ahuli's voice was quiet but steady.
"I am the wife of our tribal chief," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy and shocking.
Jack's heart skipped a beat. The tribal chief? That meant she was not only connected to powerful people, but also that her disappearance or capture could cause serious consequences. He realized in that moment that his simple act of buying her freedom might lead to conflict far greater than he could have anticipated. Jack remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. He had always thought of himself as cautious, careful in his decisions, but this situation was unlike anything he had faced before. He had acted out of compassion, but compassion alone might not be enough to protect them both. Ahuli seemed to sense his thoughts and gave a small, knowing nod. "Do not think you can fight us or trick us," she said. "My people are proud and strong. If they find me, they will demand answers. And if they are not satisfied, there could be trouble." Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I did not know," he said honestly. "I acted without knowing. But I will not turn away now. I will help you, no matter what comes." Ahuli studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Perhaps you will," she said. "But understand this. Trust is not given easily. You must earn it!" As the morning wore on, Jack and Ahuli prepared to move. They could not stay near the town. Word might spread quickly, and the wrong people could arrive before they had a chance to escape. Jack packed his belongings with care, checking his horse and supplies while Ahuli moved quietly, gathering whatever she could carry. Despite the tension, there was an unspoken rhythm to their actions, a mutual understanding forming between them. Before they left the clearing, Ahuli took Jack aside. "You must listen carefully," she said. The land ahead is dangerous, not just from strangers, but from those who know me. If we are to survive, we must be smart, patient, and respectful. You cannot act recklessly. Jack nodded, listening intently. He had always considered himself cautious, but he realized that the challenges ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. They rode for hours, moving through narrow trails and open plains, avoiding the main roads where travelers and townsfolk might see them. Jack noticed that Ahuli remained alert at all times, her eyes scanning the surroundings, her hands ready to act if needed. She spoke little, but when she did, it was to give directions or advice. Jack admired her focus and calmness. She was a person shaped by experience, someone who had learned to survive in a world that often seemed unfair and dangerous. As the afternoon approached, they came to a small ridge overlooking a wide valley. From there, they could see signs of human activity, smoke rising from distant fires, the faint sound of voices carried by the wind. Ahuli's expression grew serious. They are looking for me, she said quietly. Jack glanced in the direction she pointed, realizing the truth in her words. He felt a pang of worry. If her people were already searching, time was critical. They decided to move quickly, descending into a small forest that offered cover from sight. The trees were thick, their branches forming a natural canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered through in patches, creating patterns on the ground. Jack felt a strange sense of calm in the forest, despite the danger. There was something grounding about the quiet of nature, something that allowed him to focus on the task at hand. Ahuli moved confidently through the underbrush, leading the way, and Jack followed, trusting her instincts. As night began to fall, they reached a small clearing near a river. Jack built a fire, careful to keep it small and controlled, while Ahuli prepared a simple meal from dried meat and wild roots she had gathered along the way. They ate in silence, the crackling fire providing both warmth and a sense of security. Jack tried to understand the woman beside him. Her calmness, her quiet authority, and her intelligence made it clear that she was no ordinary person. She was someone who had faced challenges and survived, someone who had strength beyond what most men or women of the frontier could imagine. After the meal, they sat by the fire, the stars appearing one by one in the clear night sky. Jack could see the worry in Ahuli's eyes, but also determination. She was ready to face whatever came next, and he knew he had to be ready as well. We must plan carefully, she said finally. If my people find us before we reach safety, there will be questions, and not all answers will be easy. Jack nodded. Then we plan, he said, and we move with caution. As they prepared to rest for the night, Jack realized that his life had changed forever. What had begun as a simple act of buying freedom for $3 had turned into a situation filled with complexity, danger, and responsibility. He did not yet know the full story of Ahuli's life or her people, but he understood one thing clearly. His choices mattered, and the consequences of those choices could be far-reaching. Jack lay awake that night, listening to the sounds of the river and the forest. Ahuli slept nearby, her breathing steady and calm. He thought about the day ahead, about the journey they would have to take, and about the challenges that awaited them. He realized that courage alone would not be enough. Patience, respect, and careful thought would be just as important. And he knew that he would have to trust Ahuli's judgment as much as she would have to trust his. Little did Jack know the challenges they faced were only beginning. The simple act of freeing Ahuli had set in motion events that would test his strength, his wisdom, and his understanding of a world he thought he knew. And as he drifted into a restless sleep under the stars, he could not have imagined the lessons, the dangers, and the surprising alliances that lay ahead. The morning air was cool and still as Jack and Ahuli prepared to leave their small clearing. The fire had died down overnight, leaving only faint traces of smoke drifting up into the sky. Jack stretched his tired muscles and looked around at the forest, appreciating the quiet, though he knew it would not last. Ahuli was already awake, moving with the ease of someone who had learned to survive in difficult conditions. She checked the surrounding trees and paths with careful, watchful eyes. Jack felt a sense of respect for her. She seemed to notice everything: the sounds of birds, the movement of small animals, the faint impressions of human tracks. It was clear she was not just brave. She was smart, capable, and aware of danger in a way he had rarely seen. Jack mounted his horse first, glancing back at Ahuli. She climbed up behind him, her posture upright and steady. For a moment, they rode in silence, the sound of hooves softly striking the forest floor the only noise. The path ahead was narrow and winding, and Jack followed it carefully, aware that any misstep could make them visible to someone searching for them. Ahuli kept watch, pointing out potential obstacles or areas where tracks might be left. Jack listened closely, realizing that her knowledge of the land was far greater than his. As they moved deeper into the forest, the tension between them grew, not from fear, but from the understanding that the danger was real and close. Jack thought about the tribal chief and his warriors. He knew that Ahuli's capture had not been a simple matter. Her disappearance would be noticed immediately, and her people would stop at nothing to find her. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. How would they react when they realized a stranger had freed her? Could he explain himself without angering them? And how could he keep Ahuli safe while also avoiding conflict? Hours passed as they navigated the dense forest. Jack noticed that Ahuli rarely spoke unless necessary. When she did, her voice was calm, and her words were always precise. She seemed to weigh each sentence carefully, never revealing more than she thought necessary. Jack admired this about her. He had encountered many people in his life who acted impulsively, letting emotions rule their decisions. But Ahuli seemed to understand that survival required patience, caution, and careful thought. As the sun climbed higher, they reached the edge of the forest and entered a wide valley. The valley was beautiful but dangerous. It was open land, with only a few trees and patches of tall grass to provide cover. Jack slowed his horse, his eyes scanning the area for signs of movement. Ahuli leaned forward slightly, whispering, "We must move carefully." "Any human presence could be a threat," Jack nodded. He could see faint smoke rising from a distant hill, and he wondered whether it was hunters, travelers, or someone searching for Ahuli. Every small sound, the snap of a branch, the rustle of grass, made his heart beat faster. They decided to move through the tall grass, keeping low and quiet. Jack realized that he had underestimated the challenge of navigating open land while remaining unseen. Ahuli guided him with subtle gestures, pointing out dips in the ground, rocks that could hide them, and areas where the grass was thickest. He followed her lead, trusting her instincts completely. It became clear to him that her survival had depended not just on strength, but on intelligence and awareness. By late afternoon, they had reached a small river. The water was clear and cool, and Jack helped Ahuli dismount so she could drink and wash herself. They took a short break, resting their horses and gathering their strength. During this time, Jack tried to talk to her, hoping to understand more about her life and her people. "You are brave," he said quietly. "I have seen many people afraid, but you seem calm even in danger." "Calmness is necessary," she said. "If we show fear, we make mistakes. If we make mistakes, we die. My people, we live by respect and careful thought. That is why I must survive, and why you must understand what is at stake." Jack nodded, realizing that the situation was far more serious than he had imagined. He had thought freeing her was a simple act of kindness, but it was more complicated. As evening approached, they continued their journey, following the river downstream. The forest thinned, and the terrain became rocky. Jack noticed footprints in the soft soil along the riverbank. He slowed the horse, pointing them out to Ahuli. "Tracks," he whispered. "Could they be from your people?" Ahuli studied them carefully.
"Yes," she said quietly, "and they are close."
"We must be ready!" Jack's heart raced. He knew that soon they might face confrontation, and he had to prepare himself for what could come. Night fell quickly, and they found a small cave at the base of a rocky hill to spend the night. Jack built a fire, keeping it small and low to avoid attracting attention. Uli moved around the cave quietly, setting up a small area for them to rest. She seemed comfortable in the dark, relying on her senses rather than sight alone. Jack admired her confidence. In that moment, he realized that she had survived not by chance but because she had learned to understand the world in ways most people never would. As they sat near the fire, Jack spoke carefully. "Tell me about your tribe," he said softly. Ahuli hesitated, then began. "We are a proud people. Our lives are connected to the land, to the animals, to each other. We value respect, courage, and wisdom above all. My husband, the chief, leads with fairness and strength. If he knew I was gone, he would come looking for me. And he would expect answers." Jack listened intently, realizing the gravity of the situation. He had freed Ahuli, but in doing so he had placed both of them in a delicate position. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the cave. Footsteps, careful but deliberate. Jack tensed, his hand moving to the rifle at his side. Ahuli stood, her eyes alert. "They are here," she whispered. Jack's heart pounded. He realized that the danger he had been anticipating was real, and it was imminent. The footsteps grew louder, and soon a group of figures appeared at the mouth of the cave. Jack could see the outline of warriors, their movements precise and controlled. Ahuli stepped forward, holding her hand slightly raised in a gesture of peace. She spoke softly in a language Jack did not understand, but her tone was calm and commanding. The warriors paused, their weapons lowered slightly, and Jack realized that she had authority among them. He watched as they listened to her, their expression shifting from suspicion to recognition. One of the warriors, taller and older than the others, stepped forward. Ahuli spoke again, and Jack noticed a subtle change in the man's expression. Respect replaced tension. Jack did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Ahuli's presence commanded respect. She was not just a captive. She was someone important, someone whose voice mattered. Jack exhaled slowly, realizing that the immediate threat had passed, at least for now. The warriors left quietly, disappearing into the night as silently as they had arrived.
Ahuli turned to him, her expression serious but calm.
"You see," she said quietly, "we live in a world where actions have consequences. Your choice to help me—"
It changed everything. But it also shows that courage and understanding can save lives.
Jack nodded, feeling both relief and awe. He had learned a lesson he would never forget. Freedom, he realized, was not a simple thing. It came with responsibility, danger, and the need for wisdom. And in Ahuli, he had found someone who embodied those qualities more than anyone he had ever met. As the night deepened, they settled near the fire, the stars above them shining brightly in the clear sky. Jack thought about the journey ahead, knowing that it would not be easy. But he also knew that he was no longer alone. With Ahuli's guidance and strength, he felt a cautious hope. Together, they would face the struggles to come, navigating a world filled with danger, respect, and unexpected lessons. Little did Jack know, the challenges ahead would test not only his courage but also his understanding of trust, loyalty, and the true meaning of freedom. And as he drifted into a light sleep near the fire, he knew that their journey was only beginning, and that the bond formed in these first days would shape everything that came after. The following morning, Jack awoke to the sound of birds calling in the distance and the soft rush of the river nearby. The sun was still low in the sky, painting the landscape with a pale orange light. Jack rubbed his eyes and glanced at Ahuli, who was already awake and observing their surroundings carefully. Her expression was calm, but Jack noticed a tension in her shoulders that told him she was anticipating trouble. The previous night's encounter with her warriors had reminded him that their journey was far from safe. Ahuli moved toward the edge of the clearing, kneeling to examine the ground. She pointed to faint footprints that had appeared overnight, smaller than the tracks they had seen before. Jack looked closely. "They're close," he whispered. Ahuli nodded without speaking. Her eyes were sharp and alert. We must move fast, but carefully, she said, her voice low but firm. Jack understood. Every step they took from now on could change everything. They mounted their horses and began their journey again, riding silently through the narrow paths of the forest. Jack tried to focus on the terrain, the rustle of leaves, and the sound of the river nearby, but he could not stop thinking about what lay ahead.
Ahuli had warned him that her people would come looking, and Jack knew that meeting them was inevitable. He had to prepare himself for whatever confrontation awaited them.
By midday, they reached the edge of a wide valley where the sun reflected off rocky hills in the distance. Jack slowed his horse, carefully scanning the area. Ahuli leaned forward slightly, pointing to movement near a ridge. Jack squinted. He could see faint figures moving among the rocks, warriors clearly armed and organized. His stomach tightened. Ahuli's voice was calm but urgent.
"They are here,"
she said.
"and they are not just searching. They are hunting."
Jack's mind raced. He had hoped to avoid direct contact, but it was too late. They had been spotted, and the next few hours would test their courage, wits, and trust in each other.
Ahuli signaled for him to dismount, leading him down a narrow path that twisted through dense bushes.
The tall grass and rocks provided some cover, but it was not enough to completely hide them. Jack followed her, trusting her instincts completely. As they moved, Jack tried to understand Ahuli's strategy. She seemed to know the land in a way that allowed her to anticipate the warriors' movements. Every turn, every dip in the ground, every hidden crevice she pointed out gave them a small advantage. Jack realized that she had not only survived captivity, but had also learned to navigate danger with intelligence and precision. He admired her greatly, but he could not ignore the fear creeping into his mind.
If they were caught, it would not be a simple conversation. They were in enemy territory now.
Hours passed, and the heat of the afternoon made the journey even more exhausting. Jack's horse stumbled occasionally on rocky ground, and he could see that Ahuli was equally tired, though she did not show it. She remained alert, scanning the area constantly, guiding him through the safest paths. Despite the tension, Jack felt a strange sense of respect and connection growing between them. They had faced danger together, and trust was forming quietly but firmly. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Jack froze. Ahuli's hand shot up, signaling him to stop. From behind a ridge, a group of warriors emerged, their faces stern and weapons ready. Jack felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment Ahuli had warned him about. He realized that any wrong move could provoke a fight, and a fight here could be deadly. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. Ahuli stepped forward slightly, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. Her voice, calm but commanding, carried across the small clearing. Jack could see the warriors pause, their movements halting as they listened. The taller warrior from the previous encounter stepped forward, his eyes scanning Jack carefully. Jack remained still, understanding that his fate now depended on Ahuli's words and the respect she commanded. The tension was unbearable.
Jack could feel the weight of every second pressing down on him. He thought about what could happen if these warriors decided he was a threat.
He imagined the violence that could erupt, the bloodshed that could follow. But he also understood that fear would not help them. He had to trust Ahuli completely, as she had trusted him to act wisely in the first place. Ahuli spoke again, her words firm and clear, though Jack did not understand the language. He watched the warriors' reactions closely. Slowly, their faces softened, their weapons lowered slightly, and the tall warrior gave a subtle nod. Jack realized that Ahuli had convinced them that he meant no harm. Respect, it seemed, was more powerful than fear or anger in this moment. The warriors stepped back, allowing Jack and Ahuli to continue their journey. Jack exhaled slowly, feeling relief flood through him, but he knew their struggle was far from over. Ahuli looked at him, her dark eyes serious. "You see," she said quietly, "courage alone is not enough. You must also understand, respect, and act wisely. Only then can you survive." Jack nodded, realizing that this was a lesson he would never forget.
As they rode on, the valley grew narrower.
and the terrain more rugged.
Jack's horse slipped occasionally on loose rocks, and he had to guide it carefully to avoid injury. Ahuli moved with precision, leading him through the safest paths. She seemed tireless, her focus unwavering. Jack admired her endurance and skill, knowing that without her guidance, they would have been lost long ago. Evening approached, and they reached a small clearing near a grove of trees. Jack helped Ahuli dismount, and they set up a modest camp. He built a small fire, careful to keep it low, while Ahuli prepared a simple meal from the supplies they carried. The tension of the day weighed heavily on both of them, but the quiet work of setting up camp provided a small measure of comfort. They ate in silence for a time, each lost in their thoughts. Jack reflected on the events of the day. He realized that freeing Ahuli had been far more complicated than he had anticipated. He had acted out of kindness, but that kindness had placed them both in danger. He thought about the lessons he had learned from Ahuli: patience, awareness, respect, and intelligence. These were not qualities he had valued as much in the past, but now he understood their true importance. After the meal, they sat near the fire, the stars appearing one by one in the clear night sky. Jack could feel the weight of the day's events pressing on him, and he knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges. Ahuli spoke quietly, her voice steady. "We must rest now," she said.
"Tomorrow will test us further. There will be choices, and every choice will have consequences."
Jack nodded, understanding that their journey was far from over. As they settled near the fire, Jack thought about the lessons he had learned from Ahuli and the experiences of the day. He realized that freedom was not simply a matter of escaping danger. It was a responsibility, a commitment to act wisely and carefully. He also understood that trust and respect could be as powerful as courage in ensuring survival. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reached their ears. Closer this time, more deliberate. Jack's hand moved to his rifle instinctively. Ahuli's eyes narrowed, and she whispered, "They are testing us." Jack froze. From the shadows, a young warrior appeared, moving cautiously toward the camp. Jack's heart pounded, but he remembered Ahuli's words: respect and understanding first. He stayed still, letting her take the lead. Ahuli stepped forward, speaking firmly but calmly. The young warrior paused, listening to her, then glanced at Jack. His expression shifted from suspicion to cautious understanding. Jack realized that Ahuli had once again diffused a dangerous situation without a single act of violence. He felt awe and respect for her skill, understanding that she had survived not just because of strength, but because of intelligence, courage, and presence of mind. The young warrior returned to the shadows, and Ahuli signaled Jack to follow. They moved quietly through the forest, leaving the valley behind. Jack realized that the day had changed him.
He had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and he had learned lessons that would stay with him forever. He had also learned to trust Ahuli completely, understanding that her knowledge and guidance were crucial to their survival.
As night fell completely, they reached a secluded area near a small stream. Jack built another fire, keeping it low and controlled. Ahuli gathered water and prepared a modest meal. They ate in silence, each reflecting on the day's events. Jack felt a deep respect for Ahuli, understanding that her life had been far more complicated and challenging than his own. He realized that the journey ahead would continue to test them, but he also felt a quiet determination to face whatever came next. Little did Jack know the challenges they faced were only beginning. The choices they would have to make tomorrow could determine their survival, the trust between them, and the consequences of actions already set in motion. And as he drifted into a restless sleep under the stars, he knew that the lessons of courage, respect, and intelligence would be more important than ever. The morning sun rose slowly over the forest, casting long shadows across the clearing where Jack and Ahuli had spent the night. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the sound of birds and the gentle rush of the nearby stream. Jack stretched his stiff muscles, feeling the ache from days of riding and constant alertness. He glanced at Ahuli, who was already awake and surveying the land around them with her usual calm precision. Her dark eyes scanned every movement, every rustle of leaves, every shadow. Jack admired her focus and strength. He realized that she had not only survived captivity but had also learned to move through the world with wisdom and awareness that most people could not even imagine. "Today will be difficult," Ahuli said quietly, her voice carrying a sense of certainty that made Jack pay close attention.
My people are close. They will want answers, and not all questions will be easy to answer. We must be ready." Jack nodded.
He had grown to trust her completely over the past days, but he knew that this day could bring the greatest test of all. Their journey had been filled with danger, but now they were approaching the moment where courage, intelligence, and understanding would truly matter. They mounted their horses and began moving cautiously through the forest. Jack stayed close to Ahuli, following her lead as she guided them through hidden paths, rocky trails, and thick underbrush. The morning passed slowly, each step filled with tension and careful observation. Jack could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him.
If her people found them, he had to be able to explain himself. He had to prove that his intentions were good, or there could be serious consequences.
By midday, they reached a wide clearing at the edge of a plateau. From there, they could see smoke rising in the distance. Jack's heart pounded. He knew immediately that these were the warriors of Ahuli's tribe, searching for her. The figures moved with purpose, organized and disciplined, signaling that they had been tracking them carefully. Ahuli's eyes narrowed and she signaled for Jack to stop.
They are expecting confrontation,
She said softly. "We cannot run. We must face them carefully, with respect and honesty."
Any sudden movement could be seen as a threat. Jack nodded, gripping the reins tightly.
He could see the warriors approaching, their weapons at the ready, their expressions serious. For a moment, he felt fear. He had faced danger before, but never like this, where a simple mistake could turn into disaster. Ahuli stepped forward first, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. Her voice rang out, calm, commanding, and full of authority. Jack could see the warriors pause, their weapons lowering slightly as they listened. Ahuli spoke again, her words deliberate and measured. Jack did not understand the language, but he understood the effect. The warrior's expression softened, and the tension in the air began to ease. One of the warriors, older and taller than the others, stepped forward. Jack realized with a start that this must be the tribal chief himself. His presence was commanding, and his eyes were sharp, observing every detail. Ahuli approached him, her posture straight and confident. She spoke to him softly, explaining the situation. Jack could see the brief flicker of surprise cross the chief's face, followed by consideration. The chief studied Jack carefully, his gaze lingering on the cowboy who had freed his wife. Jack remained calm, knowing that any sign of fear or aggression could make the situation worse. He stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible, and spoke in a steady voice.
"I meant no harm," he said simply. "I acted because I thought it was right. I only wanted to give her freedom."
The chief's eyes remained fixed on him, and Jack felt the weight of those silent moments. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the chief nodded slightly. He spoke to Ahuli, who then turned to Jack. "You acted with courage," she translated carefully. "But you must understand that actions have consequences. You have shown respect and wisdom, but you must continue to act with care." Jack bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. He had never felt relief like this before, but he knew the test was not over. The chief stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on Ahuli's shoulder.
"You are safe,"
he said to her. His voice was firm but gentle, carrying authority and understanding. Ahuli nodded, a small smile crossing her face. Jack realized that her words and presence had earned his trust completely. The chief then turned to Jack. "You have shown bravery and honor," he said. "That is rare. You may travel freely, but always remember the respect owed to my people." Jack exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave his body. The danger had passed, and yet he knew that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. Ahuli remained by her husband's side, and Jack realized that her life was intertwined with her people in a way that demanded loyalty, respect, and understanding. He felt a quiet sense of satisfaction in having helped her, but he also understood that freedom was not a gift to be taken lightly. It came with responsibility. Over the next few days, Jack traveled with the tribe for a short distance, learning about their ways, observing their customs, and earning the trust of those around him. He discovered that their lives were guided by a deep respect for the land, their families, and each other. He learned to move quietly, to observe carefully, and to act thoughtfully, realizing that his previous life as a cowboy had only prepared him for the physical challenges, not the deeper lessons of understanding and respect. Ahuli often walked beside him, speaking softly and teaching him about her people. She showed him how to read the land, how to anticipate danger, and how to act in ways that honored the tribe's traditions. Jack found himself growing in ways he had never expected. He began to understand that courage alone was not enough. Intelligence, patience, and respect were equally important. And he realized that the trust he had built with Ahuli and her people was more valuable than any reward he could have imagined. As the sun began to set, Jack and Ahuli reached a small hill overlooking a wide valley. From there, he could see the beauty and the power of the land, the rivers winding through the fields, the hills rising in the distance, and the small movements of animals and people below. Jack felt a deep sense of connection, not just to Ahuli, but to the world around him. He realized that the journey had changed him. He was no longer just a cowboy wandering the plains.
He had become someone who understood the value of respect, courage, and intelligence.
Ahuli looked at him, her eyes calm but bright.
"You have learned well," she said softly. "But remember, the world is full of challenges. Freedom is not only about escape, it is about understanding, responsibility, and respect."
Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in his heart.
He knew that he would carry these lessons with him for the rest of his life. That night they camped on the hill, the stars shining brightly above them.
Jack lay back, staring at the sky, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about the small town where he had bought Ahuli for $3, about the dangers they had faced, and about the lessons he had learned from her and her people. He realized that a single act of kindness could have consequences far greater than he could have imagined, and that true courage required more than strength. It required wisdom, patience, and respect. Ahuli sat nearby, tending the small fire. She looked at Jack and smiled faintly.
"You have done well," she said. "And now, you understand something important. The world is connected in ways you cannot always see. Actions matter. Words matter. Trust matters. And life is a gift to be honored."
Jack nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. He knew that he would never forget this journey, the lessons he had learned, or the bond he had formed with Ahuli. In the days that followed, Jack parted ways with the tribe, returning to the frontier town where he had first met Ahuli. But he was no longer the same man who had entered the trading post weeks earlier. He carried with him a deeper understanding of courage, respect, and the true meaning of freedom. He had learned that helping someone was not always simple, and that the consequences of even small actions could ripple far beyond what he could imagine.
Ahuli remained with her people, her place beside the chief secure and respected. Jack and she shared a quiet bond of mutual respect and understanding, a connection forged through danger, courage, and shared experience.
Though their paths diverged, Jack knew that the lessons he had learned would guide him for the rest of his life. As he rode away from the hills and valleys, Jack looked back one last time. He saw Ahuli standing beside her husband, the sunlight catching her dark hair, and he felt a sense of gratitude and wonder. He realized that the journey had been about more than survival. It had been about understanding, respect, and the choices that define a life.
And as the wind carried him across the open plains, he felt a quiet peace, knowing that he had done what was right, learned what mattered most, and gained wisdom he would never forget.